Welcome back to the Mental Game of Poker podcast. I'm your host, Jared Tendler, back with another fantastic show. Today my guest is one of the most driven, hardworking, and enthusiastic players in poker today, Jason Somerville, who is a WSOP bracelet winner, over $5 million in live and online earnings, and he's becoming one of the new great ambassadors of the game, now sponsored by Ultimate Poker, and he's been spending a lot of time producing his popular Run It Up video series on YouTube. In today's show, we discuss how ambition and drive now includes an emphasis on happiness and fun, his incredible methods that he used to get Russell Thomas to prepare for the 2012 main event final table. Russell finished fourth there. And, of course, his experience becoming the first high-profile poker player to come out as gay. This is one of the most enjoyable interviews that I've gotten to do, and I'm sure you'll see why very soon. If you're new to the show and have not yet picked up a free copy of either of my books, The Mental Game of Poker 1 or 2 on audiobook, make sure you go to jaredtendlerpoker.com/TMGP free for more information. And I also often get questions about the second book, and for those who are curious about it, it is all new material. It's not a rehash of the first book, and instead covers topics like how to consistently play in the zone and how to increase your poker learning, decision-making, focus, and mental endurance. It's really just chock full of advice on how to take your game to the next level. So with that, here is my interview with Jason. Jason, thank you very much for stopping by today. I really appreciate you taking time to talk with me. You've done a lot of stuff in the last year. You've got this huge Run It Up series. You've been sponsored by Ultimate Poker now. And I think just in doing some research and looking at the stuff that you've done, like there's one common theme that I've seen, which is that you just love what you're doing and you're just having a ton of fun. Can you, for people who don't know about the Run It Up series and your relationship with Ultimate Poker, can you tell us a bit of what you have going on and maybe talk about what it is that you love so much about it?
Yeah, sure. Yeah, well, first of all, thanks for having me. And as far as the last year goes, in June or so of last year, I got in touch with the guys at Ultimate Poker. They were looking for guys just to pretty much wear a patch for the summer. It wasn't gonna be like a long-term thing. But, I was glad to get any interest at all, of course, because, poker sponsorships are a pretty rare thing these days. So, I was a little hesitant at first because I was like, once you lose your virginity for sponsorship, it's very hard to go other places, So I really wanted to make sure it was right and the time was right, And so I kind of told them what my plans were, that I was doing, videos, and I really wanted to kind of have I wanted to offer them more than just a regular pro deal, that I really wanted to be involved in some way and to do just something a little bit different and to try to contribute and help them. And I really wanted a co-promotion deal where I help them and then they actively help me. And I think at first nobody really believed that I was going to actually deliver on any of the things that I was suggesting that I would do. Right, because what poker player does anything consistently,
Yeah.
And so they were all like, all right, well, let's see how these few months go, and we'll go from there. And over those 2 months, we had created a bunch of videos and things during the summer. And at the end of the World Series, I had this idea to do a video series on YouTube where I started with a certain amount of money on Ultimate Poker and with the goal of reaching 10,000. So putting up almost every session on YouTube, just trying to track the journey as we start with $50 and try to run it up to 10,000. And it was an idea that I had always kind of played with before. I did a series on YouTube many years ago, which I look back on with mixed emotions, called Eating Cake, where I was just this bitter kid who was just bitter, sarcastic, but it was the same concept. And so I'd always liked this idea of this, start with nothing, end with more. And so I started this journey in the middle of July last year, and as time went on and people really started responding well, it kind of took a life of its own. And I just kept doing 5 shows or more a week from the middle of July pretty much through to today. I've maintained the 5 shows a week thing, which is quite the thing to do as a poker player. It was I look back on the last 9 or 10 months as my maturity into adulthood, because I never had to do anything 5 days a week.
Yeah.
Until this series, really.
Almost like you have a TV show.
Yeah. I've. It's actually funny you say that because at some point, the series became more of a show and less of a like poker series for me. Like I think that one of the things that I found that I really enjoyed about Run It Up was that I had the freedom to experiment creatively with things and to try different series. And let's try live streaming with no hole cards. And I got a final table of mine from the Heartland Poker Tour back in the day and stripped the audio and recast that. And I've done interviews and all bunch of some live videos and stuff. And over the last 9 months, I've just had this great community that's kind of built around, these principles of at core, we're all trying to do this, this Run It Up thing as like the core basis of the main channel. But I try to be positive and entertaining, and we just try to have a good time with it. I don't know, nothing forces me to do anything. Like I wanted to do this, and I wanted to do it because I thought it would be fun. And I've just never, I've always taken that attitude with everything really in the last 9 months, and I'm so lucky that I get to basically just mess around for. As like my profession these days, I get to just make cool videos and people watch them and hopefully like them. It's how can you beat it? You know what that's like. It's great. What more can you want? It's
Absolutely,
an awesome thing.
Absolutely. I mean, I think being able to love what you do is an amazing thing, and it's something that not everybody gets to do. And anybody who watches your videos for more than 10 seconds can see that your core values are clearly showing through. And so, I guess what is curious to me is like you. You're having a ton of fun, and as you said, for like the last 9 months, it's been that way. Has that always been like a pursuit of yours, like to be able to love what you do? I mean, obviously, as a poker player, you started when you were 18, or at least playing seriously then. Was it always something that you love to do, and is this sort of just the natural kind of evolution of just you doing fun things?
It's interesting because I don't remember in my teenage years ever having any kind of inclination towards any kind of performance. I used to teach karate, which was kind of like on a stage. You'd be on the front of the room and there'd be people to teach. And I never taught 300-person seminars, but I had 50 people once in a while. An average of 20, and that was probably really helpful in both. First of all, I had at one point I had 100 3 to 6 year olds I was responsible for teaching,
wow.
and
doing more than herding cats.
Yeah, and I was 15 at the time, and so you kind of get used to both explaining yourself in a way that you can be understood by a 3-year-old, and you can't do it in a way that's boring. You have to be fun and interesting, and offer your information in a way that's not only understandable but also fun if you want to build that kind of thing. And I actually think that is one of the core principles that I've kind of taken to teaching poker, which is funny to apply, teaching to 3-year-olds to teaching to adults, but it's kind of true, it's just more interesting to have a guy who will be like, we're going to put this guy in the cage, you know what I mean? This guy, he's nothing, I don't know, but it's just, it's always more fun, I think, and it's easier to learn when you're having fun. I don't think those two things have to be mutually exclusive. And, I never really was big into any kind of other performance besides that, though. I never really remember being I really want to make sure I'm having fun with my life. I always remember being much more success oriented. That I didn't know what I wanted to do, but I knew I wanted to have a lot of success at it. I had a lot of ambition and a lot of drive, and all I knew is that my mother, who was oh, you have to be a doctor or a lawyer, that was always the push. Really, I knew that was never going to happen. But besides that, I never really had I never prioritized fun. And honestly, I would go even a more step, even more general than fun, and say I never even really prioritized happiness until the last few years, which I would say is probably a consequence of the whole my life kind of reprioritizing as my brain kind of realized that I couldn't stay closeted for the rest of my life.
Yeah.
I would say that whole mental experience really kind of shaped my, hopefully the rest of my life, in that I just always was much more focused on let's make the most money we can possibly make today. And that's the approach that I took to poker, but that's not really great for long-term or even short-term happiness. And I needed to do some changing and growing up, I guess, to get to where I am today.
Well, at 26, you've grown up pretty quick. I know many 20 in their mid-20s still lost as can be. Certainly, many much older.
Yeah.
But now being on the other side, like what do you see differently? Like, how would you what do you think could have been different for you prior?
Well, I mean, it's I don't look back on my pre-24-year-old life and say, oh man, if only I did this, then I would have been so much better. Like I look back on all the decisions I made as I made the best decisions that I could at the time. I don't regret anything. I mean, but I was obsessed with poker when I was playing at the highest level and playing all the time, playing online, playing the live circuit and everything. That was all I did. You know what I mean? Like people say that and they're like, oh, but they actually went out on Friday nights and had people over and did this. No, I that's what I did. I just played poker, read books, watched videos, talked poker with friends. I had poker friends only. You know what I mean? Like I really did nothing else besides poker and video games a little bit. I'm not going to say nothing, but but I was really, really, really obsessed with poker for many years, and to the complete neglect really of doing any kind of personal growth or balance. I never really appreciated the importance of balance until recently, I would say. And I don't know. I mean, it's what I would do differently. I just don't think I was ever really mentally ready to take the steps that I took until the time I took them. I mean, as weird as that is, and I look back and say, man, if only I was more if only I had a gay friend when I was 14 years old, I would have come out when I was 14 and a half, and that would have been that. But I never had a gay friend until I was 24. And so I never really had an influence that was wow, wouldn't that be nice to just be openly proud and happy and just do your own thing, and that is who you, I never had that. I never even wanted to pursue it because I didn't go away to college. I spent most of my time prior to college and a little bit during at a karate school where most of my peers were a little bit younger than me or way older than me. So I never really had those kinds of collegiate sort of growth experiences that I think are kind of crucial for that phase of your life. And instead I just dedicated myself into poker. And I only went to high school for 2 years. I graduated high school as a junior, so I didn't even get 3 full years of high school. I mean, I was a little isolated in some ways, and I think that was both beneficial in the success, drive, ambition way, but detrimental as far as the social, mental growth phase.
Yeah, but you certainly got to the point where you were, as you said, ready, and I think that's a really powerful point because a lot of people either expect them to be ready too soon, which means they're under a lot of pressure unnecessarily.
Right.
It was, as you wrote, really, really eloquently. I mean, the blog that you wrote about when you came out was, I think, really, really well written, and to say that it just was, there was no anxiety about it. It just felt right. That's a powerful point to be in, and
for sure.
And I feel like, as you were saying, being very success and ambitious, that it was a success for you to be able to have gotten to that point where you could be open and honest about who you are on a large stage. And it's almost like that your success in poker and the success of getting to that point kind of coalesced, and then out of that, is that where this sort of big shift has happened for you? It's that's when you realize that you could have more, that happiness and fun and joy could be a part of your life.
Right. I would say that's almost for sure true. And I mean, I've said it before, but I knew for sure that I was ready to finally, post that blog, which took me only 2 months of neurotic changing and making sure every word was right. I knew I was ready when the day that I was going to post it, I felt excited and not anxious.
Yeah.
And after all the years where I only felt anxious, and would have all these doubts and worries and fears and concerns, I didn't really feel those. I mean, they were in the back of my mind, of course, because I was predicting a much more worse scenario than what actually transpired. But yeah, I knew I was ready at that point, and I don't think I was ready much sooner than then.
Yeah. It's so amazing because there's so many ways I can take this. The thing that comes to my mind immediately is something that I'm interested. So I'm going to take like a sort of selfish turn here, but so many people have difficulty like really being honest with their emotions. And like emotion as a whole seems to be very demonized, especially with guys. It's like you just kind of stuff things away, and that's our way of dealing with them. But you can see, as you were describing this, it's like your emotions were like your perfect guide. They were like like a way of kind of reflecting exactly where you were in the process. And I think that's such an asset that so many people don't get to really have some like authentic, like some real acknowledgement of where they are. They always kind of have to pretend to be somewhere else, or they can't be where they are. It's like they just can't be where they are. It's hard.
I also think that in that when you kind of have to like live the mask, where you're like kind of putting yourself to some degree, there's like, you have some level of yourself that's always kind of hidden from at least the majority of people that you spend time with, because most people aren't really close with you, right? Like, I think that if you put that mask up for too long, you actually sometimes don't even realize what the variables and the factors and the impact is of like those around you. Like I look back with at least some degree of clarity that I never had when I was actually living in those times. The fact that like, I didn't come out or talk about it for many years because at one point my dad, who is a very loving, sweet man, made a derogatory comment about a relative of mine who happens to have been at that point with a woman, and she's a woman, obviously. Mm-hmm. So he made like a derogatory comment, but I took it to mean an anti, like a homophobic thing, whereas he just like the woman just made really bad decisions back in that era, and it was more about the decisions than it was that part of her life. And that singular comment probably set my coming out back 5 years.
Yeah.
Like I was like, wow, I guess okay. Like I think that when you kind of live. I don't know, when you put up the shields and the walls and you kind of like repress parts of yourself and don't even like, if you're not honest with yourself and you don't even like analyze the emotions that you're actually feeling and say, well, like, wow, what do I really want? What am I really doing to myself? Am I doing these things because it's what other people want, or it's because what's best for me? Life isn't all that long, I'm just saying, generally speaking, and trying to live your life the way that others want you to, or that others think you should, is not really a recipe for happiness. And I think that realizing that is one of those things that was crucial for my life and happiness. Not to mention for YouTube, because those YouTube comments, you got to put up.
Nothing like a good troll.
Yeah, you got to be ready a little bit for that.
Yeah, of course. It's so interesting though, because I think the idea of like living behind the mask is true for so many people, whether they're gay or straight. And I think I hadn't really thought about it, but I think there's probably a lot of straight people who could learn a lot from people who have been able to come out as gay. I mean, it seems like the process is different because the topics are different, but coming out to your friends and saying, difficult things about your childhood, or even admitting that a part of your poker skill, if we're just talking technically, like that you just suck at these things. It's been amazing, with a lot of my clients, how freeing it's been for them to realize that they actually suck a lot more than they realized. And it's like, it's like I can deal with that. Like, yeah, I suck. It's like the Keeping the Faith, Ben Stiller and Ed Norton, who were playing the rabbi and the priest, and Ben Stiller was teaching this kid how to do his bar mitzvah, Haftorah, and teaching that's like there's this whole thing with it, and he just got him to say this phrase over and over again. I love that I suck. I love that I suck. And you just kind of embracing your own reality is just so freeing. Right. But there's a lot about actually being able to accept that is very difficult.
I think that's a great example, though, because, it's one thing that if you don't want to tell your friends and stuff that you happen to, like, really suck at, like, push-fold math. Like, it's one thing if you don't want to tell your friends that, but if you just deny the fact that you're not good at push-fold math, you're never going to improve at it. You're not going to spend time at it. You know what I mean? Like, I think it's important that you at least acknowledge to yourself that you suck at those things so that you can go out fixing them and repairing them and improving them if that's something you want to do. But I think too many people will, like, on so many levels, apply the, like, denial to the point where that they deny it to the point in their own psyche and don't just, like, address it or at least be aware of it and be come to terms with it. Like, I think one of the things that I'm best at now is trying to be aware always of like what's impacting me, what do I really want, what am I doing, like what am I spending time on things that's going to take me to a place that I want to be. If I like, I've put a lot of thought into the fact of like, so if I spend another year on YouTube and everything goes massively successful and I get 50,000 views per video, is that really something I want? Like, where does that lead me to? What am I giving up by doing that? How does that impact my personal relationships? How does that, I mean, I had to move from my hometown, from my home state to Vegas, I mean, what are the things that I'm giving up in order to achieve that? And what does that lead to? And then what if I do this instead? And what if I focus on this? And, I feel like I've really tried to be present. And I guess that's not really present. That's kind of in the future. But I've really tried to be conscious, I guess, of all of these things. And I think any truly like top level poker player is extremely conscious of both what's going on around him or her and what's in his own mind.
Yeah, I actually would disagree that you're not being present. I think the idea of being present is sometimes like too localized, like just thinking about only what's happening in this one particular moment. You'd be futurizing things if you were thinking about what you would do after the next thing and you were kind of living there. But
right.
you're what it sounds like you're doing is trying to make the most EV decision for your life, like you would as a poker player analyzing the factors of a hand. I mean, you're just kind of running through all the different scenarios, and I think that thoughtfulness is always going to be driven by your values and what you're trying to accomplish. And again, like there's just a lot of people who don't always know what their real values are, and so it becomes hard to live out the life that they want to live.
Sure. And I mean, how many people absorb their values or virtues from those around them? I mean,
right.
humans as a society are very much like that, where we draw our opinions from those that are around us. Usually, those are the loudest. I mean, I don't know much about your personal life, obviously, or anything. But for me, it took me being in a relationship to realize how similar I am to my mother. When I was a kid, I would always be like, "Oh my God, I'll never be like that." But I'm really like my mother in a lot of ways, and not necessarily in good ones. It's just like like the way that my mother would react to things and treat people, and how she would deal with situations. Those are things that I mimic even without really realizing it. And it kind of took having a boyfriend that cared enough to tell me these things to point that out to me and me be like, oh wow, I didn't really realize that I was doing that. I mean, or that there's a similarity there. And I think in many ways that's true, that we kind of are not necessarily a chameleon, but that we kind of absorb the characteristics of those around us, and to be at least aware of that impact, I think, is kind of important,
Yeah, agreed. And it's great that you have somebody that close to you that can reflect that. I mean, I've been lucky enough being married now for been with my wife, my now wife, for over 3 years. We've been married less than a year, but she has done that for me, and I mean, I think all of us to a certain degree are very much like different aspects of our parents, still unique in our own ways, but like you, I've had to face my own, like, wow, I'm really like my dad and my mom that way, and
right.
I mean, it's I think a necessary natural step to go through, and then to resolve and become your own person. You kind of take the good and the bad.
It's great to have that, though, right? I mean, at least for me, to have somebody that served as kind of like a sanity check for like a lot of things. I mean, for me at least, I found that to be extremely useful, that I could just be like, does this sound right to you? Am I missing like a major thing here? And have some feedback come back, whether I was closer to reality or farther than I thought. Like I found that to be one of the biggest benefits that I never anticipated of having a really close relationship,
Yeah, and that's how you know it's special. I mean, when you have somebody who can be, I mean, it's wonderful that you are able to be as honest with yourself, and now having somebody else who can be that for you too. It's like there's an exponential growth factor in that, and I think I wish that obviously for you and for everybody listening, to be able to have that ability, because to me growth is just so essential, and things become static, or when they feel static, I should say, then that's where the happiness, the joy gets sucked out of it. Even though things are hard, as long as you know that there's some progress and moving forward, it's that difficult times become a lot easier.
Right. Well, it's funny because for me particularly, I wrote I don't really know what to call it, but I wrote like a one-off, like it was like a part essay, part journal thing, like back when I was in my like upper teens, about how badly I wanted like a super close friend that I could share everything with. And I had this like long theory, sort of an essay thing about how like the benefits of this and how it would be great and everything, and like such like an awkward thing to write in retrospect, that what I was really seeking, and it seems plainly obvious when I would go back and read it these days, and I would be like, well, duh, clearly you just want a boyfriend, like, you know, like,
Yeah.
like you just want someone that you can really actually be yourself with. Like, you know, I look back on that time in my life and be like, wow, yeah, clearly. I mean, obviously that was something that I had desired at that point. I'm actually really kind of happy that I wrote that, because I at least can look back and be like, well, so clearly I had already wanted it, you know, wanted that kind of closeness, even though I was like, you know, 8 years removed from coming out or whatever at that point. But yeah, I don't know.
Yeah, it's cool to have that kind of feedback, because it's so easy to forget about who we were, how we were thinking back years ago, and I think writing is a tremendous tool, both for what you're going through today and also in retrospect.
I was going to ask if you were a big note taker, because I feel like that's I'm a huge writer these days, for just like writing like both like status updates about like how I feel like privately, not like even publicly, just like
I see. Yeah.
like benchmarks, so I can go back and be like, wow, I was really worried about those things back in the day, or I had those ideas in that phase of my life. And I don't know, I'm a big like scribbler, note taker at this point in my life. I don't know about you.
Yeah, no, I certainly am. I mean, I definitely learn by talking, but I also learn a lot by writing, and so I've been very kind of committed to personal development since I guess I was like 20, so like for the last like 15 years, and for 10 years I kept a journal where I was basically writing at least 5 times a week for those 10 years. So
that's amazing.
That was definitely some of the biggest growth of my life. Came from that. Unfortunately, one of the bigger mistakes I've made in my life was putting all of those journals on a moving truck that actually burned up in a fire. Crazy enough.
Oh wow!
When I was moving from Oregon back to the East Coast, so that was pretty brutal, but
wow.
somewhat transformative in a weird. I mean, you know, I had grown a ton, learned a lot. It was like sort of being able to put that behind me, but
sure.
But yeah, I think writing has been an incredible tool for me. I continue to use it both personally, professionally. I've actually just started doing this very seriously now, keeping clear notes at kind of the beginning and the end of the day, and then throughout the day, about kind of just little performance things that I'm trying to do and becoming more productive and using my time more efficiently, because there's just so many things that I want to do, and it's very hard for me to not be sort of singularly focused. So trying to do multiple things is a challenge. So writing is a huge tool for being able to make that change.
It's funny. It took, for me at least, it took a large demand on my time, like a really insane demand on my time, before I really finally realized I had to kind of get organized at least a little bit if I wanted to be like a real human being. Otherwise, I was just like working like crazy. I was just spending, you know, I think from, I would say, October through January, I was working six and a half days a week for full days. I would have like an hour and a half at the end of every night. That would be it. Otherwise, it was just like nonstop craziness. But I had no organization. I was just like throwing myself into whatever it is that had to get done and not stopping till it was over. And no prioritizing, really. No, just doing it. I mean, I never learned these skills as a poker player. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Like, no one ever taught me how to be organized, really.
And don't say that if you went to college it would have happened, because I went to college and grad school and still am learning it. So, yeah. Well, listen, we could talk about this stuff forever, and I would love to at some point with you. But I have many more questions that I want to get to that
sure.
I'm really curious about. So after you wrote that blog in 2012, like just like a week later, you were out playing the LAPC and ended up finishing 6th. Like, was there like a tangible difference in how you felt amongst your peers, and actually, and in terms of your play? Like, what was that like?
Well, I mean, I kind of, once I made the post, then I realized like LAPC was a tournament that I had went to several times before. I mean, it's a pretty major tournament, you know, one of the biggest 10Ks in the country at that point, at least. And I mean, I was kind of like, I was excited to go out there because people were so positive that I knew it would be like it would be an interesting experience, that I was going to get some interesting feedback, like, but I don't think that it like really impacted my poker play too much. I mean, I don't remember feeling like particularly capable of check raising that, like I don't remember, I don't believe like I had any difference in terms of like my actual play.
And no less pressure or anything?
No, because like I just was I'm very 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 able to like compartmentalize my brain out. I think like I just think that, I mean, you have to be, if you're going to be in denial for 24 years, you have to be able to do that.
Fair point.
Like I'm very good at secret keeping. I'm just gonna say.
Right.
Like I'm very, very capable of just kind of like firewalling out, not just, I mean, actually, I've had it pointed out to me that it's almost like a skill that I'm actually very capable of like turning things off if I need to. But yeah, I don't remember the play being any different, but I remember the experience being great. I mean, so many people from so many different walks of life talked to me that trip, and I mean, it was people that were just like random people who were just happened to be at Commerce who would tell me stories about, their kid or their brother or whatever, that, that how hard it had been for them. And, I just got so many people that shared their stories with me, or, like poker players who have nothing to do with anything, who were just being supportive, and in such a diversity, it's not just like young kids my age, but, Joe Hashem, I remember talking to me, and Tommy Vedis or Vidis or whatever, he talked to me. I was like, oh my God, I'm not even friends with this guy. He's so on the opposite spectrum of me as far as, but, I remember how great it was that I had such like, I really felt like it was like the community's acceptance was like, I don't know, it was great. And the fact that I happened to make such a deep run was just like awesome. I mean, it was storybook up until the point I didn't win the coin flip, but it's fine. I'm not a complainer.
Sure.
It was great. It was a great experience.
Well, one of the things you wrote about in that blog was that at the time there were no male openly gay, certainly not high profile poker players.
Right.
It's been 2 years now. Do you feel like you're an ambassador for the gay community, or certainly within poker? Do you feel like you're just like a ambassador for poker and not sort of like living by that association?
Well, I mean, it's funny because I don't truly feel capable of speaking for the gay community. I'm not actively involved in any kind of gay activities. I mean, I've done some stuff with like charities, like one-offs and stuff like that, but I haven't really ever ingrained myself in the community. I mean, I have like, only a handful of gay friends, and I just don't really, I don't know. I would never identify as a member of the gay community, except for the fact that, by orientation alone, you know what I mean? So, like, does that make me a part of it? Yes, it does. But on one hand, it does. On one hand, it doesn't. You know what I mean? However, I feel very much capable of speaking for the poker community. Mm-hmm. So, I mean, I on one hand, I kind of feel like I actually kind of think that because I am, I don't know. I feel like it's a decent spot to be as far as like, yeah, am I an ambassador for the gay community? No, but I think that, there's really nothing about me that is different in any regard to any other poker player besides the fact that I happen to have a boyfriend. You know what I mean? Like, I don't know. Like, I think for those that are closed-minded or were closed-minded, like, to see somebody like me who is, as, I mean, I'm not going to say I'm normal by any regards, but mostly in some ways, normal. I don't know. Like, I think that maybe I was able to be more embraced or whatever because I'm not necessarily super stereotypical in that regard. But yeah,
possibly. But I mean, as you said in there, like the poker community is based on a lot of people who just are genuinely pretty open-minded. I mean, you kind of have to be in that sphere because it is not something that's generally accepted in society in general. So it's like you're kind of in like the perfect community for it in that regard. Besides the personal connection to it.
I mean, I have had very close to zero issues over the course of the last 2 years in terms of like in-person stuff.
Mm-hmm.
And I mean, like, quite the opposite. I've had a tremendous number of positive experiences, and I have had a great experience all in all. I mean, I don't know. I'm a little excuse me. I'm a little surprised that there haven't been more openly gay, people to like follow in my wake, so to speak, because my reaction was so good that I had felt that like, well, there will surely be at least a couple more because after this was fine. But yeah, exactly. And there have been some that have come out to me privately, and then for various reasons not wanting to come out publicly. So they do exist, in some number at least, but far fewer than I would have expected, to be honest. I mean, everybody has to make their own decisions in their own life, and I understand very well that you just, it's not as easy as just flipping a switch and being like, hello,
yeah,
like, I'm here, you know what I mean? Like, it's not that easy. I understand that, but I mean, I think we'll get there eventually in some regards or another, but. Yeah, I guess I've been a little surprised at that.
Yeah, and it may be more on the personal family side. That holds people back as well. I mean,
sure,
like society in general is moving that way, but there's still
some
very entrenched thought.
Yeah, right, or that there's just not enough upside. You know what I mean? Like if you're like a high stakes tournament player, does it really matter if you come out or not? You know what I mean? Like, I mean, it matters. I think that it will probably make your happiness level better. I mean, I don't know. There's plenty of arguments for and against it, but what if you're truly out there trying to make money and it's a job for you? You're just playing, the live tournament circuit. Does it really make a difference? You know what I mean? I mean, all it's going to do is get you. You're going to get more attention. If you're not looking for that attention or that spotlight, then who cares? Whatever.
Yeah.
I think people got to make their best decisions for themselves and go from there.
That makes sense. Well, making a really, really poor transition. Speaking of spotlights, going back to the 2012 main event, I'm really interested in this because you got to do something that I want to do, which is coach a November Niner.
Yes.
And there's been this theory that's been rattling around my brain for a while, that 3 months is not a long time as far as learning goes.
Right.
And that the primary goal for a November Niner should be to make sure that they eliminate their weaknesses. You took it to a level that I had never even envisioned taking it, where you had Russell Thomas basically running hundreds of simulations over the course of, I don't think it was the full 3 months, but it was for a good chunk of time. You had 14 people working with you, everybody kind of playing their part in the final table, being Merson, being Silva, all the different players there. So what was your experience for Russell with that? Like, do you feel like you kind of created something that could actually be a template for others to do? Like, what do you feel like the results of it were?
Man, it was one of the most fun experiences of my life for sure. And when Russ and I started talking about it, I had told him that the elevator pitch was that I would prepare him the way I'd prepare myself. And I've always been a big, my dad always used to drill that, we need to be as prepared, like preparation breeds success, and that was what we were going to do. So we had laid out that the first month we were going to just work about general poker. We were going to talk about general no limit hold'em. That was what we did the first month, and that the second month we were going to focus on tournament poker. That was the W Coop was going on at that time. So it was easy. We had a month of tournaments to play, in Toronto, or we could talk about every day there were decisions to talk about and review and analyze. And then the last month we were going to spend doing simulations and worry about just the main event final table. And I went out and I tried to make sure that we had Russ as comfortable as possible for anything that could happen, that we prepared for all the worst case scenarios, because Russ had Jake Balsiger on his left, and we prepared for a scenario where Jake would get all the chips and that Russ would be a little bit shorter. And that's kind of what happened at the actual main event final table. Russ had already lived that. Not only had he lived it, but he had lived it, and we had reviewed it and discussed it, and we had went through every hand that had happened in that simulation. And I had a person whose job it was to basically replicate Jake Balsiger. Like we had a kid who was a young, aggressive kid who didn't have a ton of MTT experience, and I just said, you're gonna make sure you're gonna put Russ in the cage for this. Basically, you're gonna be really aggressive for these scenarios. And we, sometimes we would start it in an accelerated period. Sometimes we would start it at the very beginning and just play it out. But I really tried to make sure that Russ was as prepared as possible for as many things as we could prepare him for. And there were things that I would not have been strong at. Like one of the things that Russ wanted to really be sure of is that if he got very short stacked, like 9 or big blinds or less, that he would make correct mathematical decisions in that regard. And I've never been a real sit and go player, and I've never claimed to be any kind of like math wizard. So we brought in people that were those things, and they drilled so many simulations with Russ as far as what he should do with this and that hand, and what the breakpoints are for all these different things. And then they did quizzes and stuff, and we really wanted to make sure that he was as comfortable and felt as prepared as he could be. And by the time that the main event final table came around, I felt like he was. I felt like there really wasn't much else that we could have done to prepare him. Now, I mean, if I could do it again, I would have things that would change, of course. But I felt like for the two of us basically just guessing for as far as what we thought would be good, I was pretty happy with what we had prepared. All in all, I thought there were very few curveballs at the final table, and I thought it was great. All in all,
and you feel like the actual results of him and the way that he played reflected the preparation.
Well, I mean, obviously, it's the cards that he happens to be dealt at the main event final table are going to dictate the results beyond anything that we'll ever prepare for. But as far as him feeling comfortable, him feeling confident, I thought that he had a significant edge in the fact that I don't think there was anybody else at that final table that had as much experience playing with 100K chips, 250,000 chips, 500K chips. Like we played with those chips exactly near to the quantities that they had at the table, because I had a lot of chips for this tournament, and they still had 5K chips in play for it was like 45K ante or whatever. The ante was like a weird number. So Russ was comfortable with exactly what the bet sizes were, knew what all the chips were like. I mean, I felt like we did as much as we could do to make Russ as comfortable as possible. I actually think that if I could have went back and done one more thing, I would have tried to prepare Russ more for the arena, because I don't think we had prepared really much for that. When Rob Salaburu would win a pot and the whole arena would be Salaburu, it would be, there was a lot of yelling and chanting. And if you saw last year's final table when they were the walk, the walking, yelling chant thing they were doing was actually pretty effective in getting walks for whoever that was that had that in their rail section. I mean, you can't. It's hard to prepare for that. And
it's almost like you got to be the football team pumping in crowd noise.
Yeah. I should have booked them some speaking arrangements or something. Had them go to an actuary convention or something. But yeah, I thought we did I loved the challenge, man. It was so awesome. Not to mention the fact that we also did that little documentary.
Yeah, which was really
final
cool.
Table, which was just it was a thing that we didn't really plan too much in advance for. It was kind of hey, this sounds like a good idea. Let's do this in a week from now. And we already had the plans for all the players to come in, and BJ Nemeth, the reporter, to come and write down all the hands, and we already had that all set up. So I was like, hey, why not just have these two guys come and do this mini documentary? And it was my first foray into real filmmaking. And I thought that it would give Russ an opportunity both to get better on camera, to get more comfortable, to make something of this platform, because there is almost no chance that he'll ever have that kind of platform again in poker, at least. I mean, you're never going to get that much attention in any other regard, So I thought it would both capitalize on that opportunity and just be a sweet piece of filmmaking, it would just be a series that he'd always have to look back on and be wow, that was awesome. and I feel pretty good about that. I mean, we got a minute of it on ESPN. That's pretty sweet.
That's awesome. Well, it's well done, man, especially for a first foray, and it certainly was well done to do that kind of preparation. As I said, it was well beyond what I thought anybody could ever do. So you certainly expanded my ideas of what November 9 preparation could actually look like.
I think that there's still so much you could do. You know, I mean, I think people almost always. I don't think people do enough. You know, like I think it's kind of like unique to poker in that these 9 people are given a shot to win $10 million and don't spend every waking moment up until that point preparing. Like, not every moment, but, you know, I get the feeling that, you know, there have been at least some people that have made the final table that have done nothing to prepare.
Oh, I mean, that's definitely true. It's
crazy. It's absolutely absurd. If I gave like a random person on the street a chance to win $100,000 in 3 months, if it was a pogo jumping contest, or if it was whatever it was, no matter what it was, like, you know, people would work crazy to do it. I'm not really sure why people just take poker as like, I'll be fine. Like, I don't understand why that attitude comes from.
Yeah.
But.
Well, and it's hard to understand too, because you could very easily realize that if you spent, let's say, I mean, it would be a large amount, but let's say you spent 600 hours over those several months, but it made you $1 million.
Sure.
You know, you're getting paid well over $1,000 per hour that you spent there. Like, that's pretty well. I mean, that's a pretty decent earn rate.
Right, and not only that, but like, you know, well, we looked at it from like the Tommy Angelo point of view, where, you know, every single thing that we do, every single day that we spend working, that our opponents are spending relaxing, is an edge in our favor. Every single decision that we make in favor of working or thinking, or every single situation that we look at or scenario we develop that we can analyze and go through, that's an edge that we have that our opponents do not have.
Right. Is that reciprocality? Is that what?
Yeah, exactly. I'm a big fan of that as a concept to all sorts of life thinking.
Yeah,
I mean, I think that's just a great way to look at so many different situations. You know, you and I both play at a poker table. We both get a phone call from somebody that would annoy us. I go on a -2 tilt. You go on a -10 tilt. That's great. That is great for me. I'm proud to be, you know, -2 and you're -10 in that situation. You know, I think Tommy Angelo has some great thoughts, generally speaking, and he was a big. Even though I've never talked to him, his book was and his videos were a big impact on my game years ago, and I applied them to coaching, and I think that it makes a lot of sense. You know,
absolutely. Tommy's he's got a lot of great stuff to say, and he and I have had a number of conversations, and it's striking how similar our philosophies are, even though as different as we present them.
Right.
Good stuff, man. Well, Jason, thanks again for stopping by today. It's been really, really good to talk to you. As I said, I certainly could talk to you for much, much longer. And yeah, wish you well, buddy.
It's been a pleasure. We'll have to have you run it up sometime.
Yeah, I'd love to, man. Absolutely. And and I know you're from the Long Island area, so next time you're in the New York City area, maybe we could always do something in person that way too.
Yeah, that would be great for sure, man.
Good deal. All right, well, take care, buddy, and I'll talk to you later.
Awesome, man. Talk to you soon.
All right. Thanks again to Jason for coming on the show today. He's an impressive guy, and I know we'll be hearing about him and from him for many years to come. If you want to check out his video series, Run It Up, go to his website, jasonsomerville.com, or his YouTube channel, J Carver Poker. And of course, be sure to follow him on Twitter also, @JasonSomerville. That is it for today's show. I hope everyone has a great week, and until next time, I wish you all very well.